40, when they initially set up the broadcast band, 540 was not part of that band. It went to 550. When the CBC applied for 540, there was some hemming and hawing, but they put it in anyway, so they left it. Another one of the reasons why CBK was put here, at that time, just below 540, we were getting into a marine emergency band. And they didn't want any chance of CBK getting involved in that. We had to watch our frequency very carefully here. If all of a sudden the transmitter went on its own, we'd have to shut it down. But there was a frequency monitor that would shut the plant down if it went too far off frequency.
Was it prone to drift off frequency very much?
Not more than about 2 cycles or 3. Yeah, we had two crystals. At that frequency, the crystal is about that size. It's quite a big device, and it's all rubber mounted and temperature controlled.
That was always interesting. They used to monitor. They monitored all the radio stations to make sure that they stayed on frequency, And I don't think that CBK ever had their knuckles wrapped because they had drifted one way or another. And another interesting thing about the 50,000 watts, that was the maximum power that you could pretty well go in North America at the time. It was 50,000 watts.
And for radio, it still is. Except that's an agreement, international agreement, but it's primarily between Canada and the U.S. Mexico,
they can go.
They have a megawatt at 540. Because they're not part of that agreement. And you can often hear it here on Skip.
See, a megawatt, that's how much?
1,000,000 watts.
Million, yes.
50, well, this is 50,000.
Yeah.
That's a million.
Right. So they must be able to hear them for a ways.
Well, it's needed down there. The closer to the equator you get, the higher the noise level is in the broadcast band.
At night, if you would be on maintenance and if you took a small radio, a little transistor out to the tuning house with you, the transmitter was shut down, of course, And it was amazing when you went near that tuning circuit, the tower was tuned exactly, And that little radio, you would pick up all kinds of stations that you never even heard of, right around 540.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was really alive out there.
One thing that Orin and I wouldn't be involved in, but that was an anonymous ham radio operator who worked out there at one time, took his mobile, which is his unit 35 watt transceiver in his car, and went out there, and after sign off he hooked his transceiver onto a 35 watt transceiver onto the tower. Just curious to see what would happen. It was matched properly anyway, and he was working a guy in Southern California. The guy said, "Man, have you got a clean signal? How come? What you got for an antenna?" And the guy said, "Well, I got a 465-foot whip, pretty cool whip."
How could he do that? Oh, that was when the
When we were off the air.
CBK was shut down. You're right.
Shut down, and he
Yeah.
went and hooked up there.
You must remember that the tower was energized right at the bottom. The whole tower was hot when we were on the air.
Yeah.
It wasn't. That's why it sat on that big porcelain insulator.
Yeah.
It's isolated. And,
So we're talking about pretty high voltage on that. I know we talked about this in the another video there, but what kind of voltage and wattage and amperage was involved in that?
Well, in the building,
transmitter there, and
we could read the current on the antenna. Now that antenna being a quarter wave antenna, it's equivalent to roughly a balanced thing. So you have 50 ohms going into it, which is what the coax was. So there's very little loss that way. and they'd be just under 30 amps. It was 29.6, if I recall.
Yeah.
Uh,
Until we went to the
well,
the short tower.
well, we won't go. We never did count that as anything useful.
But
I put a lot of miles on trying to
but
counteract that problem.
yeah, 30 amps. We were putting out a good 50
A
kilowatts.
good 50 kilowatts.
Yeah.
29.6 was what the amperage was, according to
Yeah.
not getting over 50 kilowatts.
Whatever the voltage actually would be on the tower would be kind of hard to really determine.
At 50, if we were talking about 50 kilowatts and 29.6 amps, it was a little over 16,000 volts at the base of the tower, or of RF.
So you wouldn't want to get anywhere
well,
near
No,
that.
RF burnt.
Yeah.
There was no shock. You get burnt.
I can give you an example. When we were having some rewiring done on the tower, did it live, and there was a rigger standing going at the bottom of the tower. There's a breaker box at the bottom of the tower, and he was doing some wiring in there. And he took his jackknife that he was using for stripping wire, leaned back, and dropped it onto that brace around the side where the insulator is for feeding into the tower. Now, with an insulator that high, or 8-inch insulator, you'd think there might be some voltage there. But anyway, he just dropped it on that thing, went back to do some cleaning, and I looked out the office window upstairs there, and I saw him do that. And, oh my gosh! And I'm down the stairs and tearing on the walkway out there, and I said, "Don't touch that knife! Don't touch it!"
Yeah.
He picked it up. I saw him the next year at a broadcast engineering, WABE, in Edmonton. He still had the burn right straight through his hand here. So you could see the bone. On his thumb was. You could see right to the bone. It never did completely heal.
So the knife went right through.
Well, yeah.
The knife, picking up the knife, well, he didn't. He grabbed the knife and it arced and burnt and dropped.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, what he couldn't understand is, it burnt his thumb, but there was no marks on his feet or any other part of his body, just on his thumb. Because he was fully charged already himself, and he just discharged through that knife. So it's nothing to play with. I've had getting into television, into things like the television tower, unless there's an AM combined with it, which is not that usual because it gets too complex. The television tower is grounded. It's fastened right to ground. There's no insulators. But the frequencies are much more dangerous as far as people are concerned. I had a guy get around our guards in Regina at the time of the tower. He was just coming down when the RCMP caught him. And they phoned me up and said, "Do you want to lead charges?" And I said, "No, just tell him I feel very sorry for his family. Because it's going to have problems, or he could have problems." He walked right across the face of a TV antenna that had over 600 watts in a very short area, a short wave. Like the TV antenna is about that much, so that's roughly a quarter of a wave of that frequency, channel 9.
What would that do to a person? That's like radiation?
Non-radiative, it's non-ionizing radiation. So it's not like atomic radiation, but it's like radio or X-ray radiation. And you're not supposed to get too much of it because it can cause cause problems with birth situations and genetics.
Right.
The RF, I did get one RF burn when we were going from the open transmission line to the 50 ohm, when we were going from the 230, and I got a knuckle, I think it was this knuckle here, I just happened to touch the open transmission line, and I didn't feel anything, but I could smell this burning, and gee, I looked and here my glove was on fire. I took another look and there's my knuckle, the bone. And it didn't hurt at the time. Boy, the next day, and it took forever to heal up. That RF, it just seemed to kill everything. The cells or whatever it does. It just Awful stuff.
I know you told me told the story of the crows there on the two wires there, or on the last video, but I think it'd be nice to hear it again. Were you there too?
Well,
William?
that was a common occurrence actually with red magpies.
Yeah.
They'd sit out there, and you think they got a thrill trying to tap each other on the beak. You know, I never did see any fry, but
Yeah.
I never see them try it on wet weather. That would have been more interesting. But it was very crows and magpies. The magpies are the one that are bigger, and I could not get over it. You know, their tails would touch. It seemed to bother them at all. And 2,300 volts between those two buses.
Well, that incident that I remember was that they were fighting over.
Oh yeah.
They had, and whether it was it could have been a piece of it could have
Not gopher.
no, it might have been a wrapping off chocolate bar.
Yeah.
It could have been foil, but anyway, one disappeared. That was the end of that.
Yeah, you said there wasn't any fire at all. Just
No, there was. It was just poof.
yeah.
And while he was down there, but it.
Yeah, the wrapping probably touched the other bus. So
Well, no, they were on each other bus, and they just finally made the proper contact.
One of the things we had trouble with there was gophers, so we had quite a time keeping gophers down. Gophers can go down and end up we had lines running all the way out to the tuning house underground. And you're always worried about gophers stripping those things down for their monitoring stuff and all that. The power for the lighting all went underground in a wooden box.
They chew through the wires, or
Yeah, I never heard of problems that way. The only problem I ever heard of with wiring was the time that they couldn't find where the ground was at the tower. Remember that?
Yeah.
That was after I got transferred. I was in Worcester, and after the tower came down, and they were out there doing some work, and they said, "Where's this ground?" They phoned me in Regina, and I said, "Where's the ground for the tower?" And I said, "Well, where should it be?" "Right at the base of the tower." Well, I said, "That's where it is." "No, we can't find it." "What?" So they got me one of these nice Yukons from there. I couldn't work for them. I was retired already. Gave me a Yukon. Money, and I came up here with their Yukon. They gave me a driver's permit for it, and came up here, walked up the tower. I said, "It's there." "No, it isn't." "Dig down 5 feet, you'll find it."
Yeah.
And we found it when they dug down 5 feet. They only went down about 18 inches. I said, "This shouldn't be down that deep." I said, "Well, you tell that to the double tower that came down and pushed it there."
all right.
Oh, that tower must have gone into the ground.
Roughly 5 feet, we say 5 or 6 feet. Yeah.
6 or 7 feet
Yeah,
when
5 or
it
6
came out.
feet,
When
yes,
it
yeah.
broke, that insulator broke. It
And
just
slid
went
down this big concrete one and right into the ground, and then bounced out. Right down.
Well, it's like 60 tons, isn't it, or something
66
like that?
we guessed it was,
66.
and it had, and when that fell down, none of the guy wires broke. A couple of insulators broke, but
That
none
was
of the guy
amazing.
wires. They held right on there and just wrenched it into pieces.
Could that happen today, or are they better secured? Or
Well, not as likely with this kind of a tower. That one was called a saddle. Just the 3 guy positions. That's ideal for an AM. But the top part where the high energy isn't connected to the ground at all, or tied to the ground. And the big problem with that, you could stand at the bottom on any given day and look up at that thing, and you could see that top light appear and disappear, and appear and disappear. So there was always a certain amount of motion up there, and you could feel it.
yeah,
When I had to do that repair on that transmission on the conduit, I had to put a clamp on the conduit, and I had a ratchet wrench. I was going like this. Just started feeling funny. I just stopped doing that. The whole car was going in that mass. I mean, what, 7 feet wide,
Yeah.
3/8 steel, and just sitting in the middle part of it like that, going with the ratchet wrench, it's got it pulsing.
how much would it move back and forth a little bit? Do you think at the top?
Well, the guy that used to come out and check the tower, he said that moved 6 feet up there. And you know, at night, if it was windy at night and you stood at the bottom of the tower and watched it, it did a snake dance. It wouldn't move where the main guy wires were attached, but it would move above there, and then it would kind of do this.
And we figured
And
that's
it, and it was, and it did quite a.
Yeah.
But then you were looking at, you know, you were looking at 465 feet of tower, and a little bit of movement when you were that close to the tower. It maybe was exaggerated.
Yeah. But the problem, I think, that snake dance, when it got that big plow wind or whatever it was, we still think it was a twister.
Oh, sure it was.
Got that going like that, and it fractured the insulator.
Right.
And when that insulator fractured, it not only did it come down and hit the top, it went off and slid down. So there was 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 to 20 feet it moved.
And when it stopped going into the ground, that's when the tower ripped in half, because that top piece was
still
there was so much energy,
still anchored.
Yeah.
and it just kind of ripped it in half, and
So it broke in half, and then the top fell.
and then
in.
the top laid to the east.
Yeah.
And the beacon on there, how big is that beacon?
About that, yeah, about 5 foot.
And that big around, and it was just dust. And the glass, you know, it must have hit the ground at an awful speed.
And yet some of the side lights, well, I've got one at home. You got one.
Oh yeah, near the bottom.
Near the bottom, the side lights were the lamp. You opened up and looked at the bulb, which didn't have. It was just a clear bulb. The elements in it were bent right over and touching one side from the bulb, but the glass globe itself was intact. A couple of them were.
Yeah.
So that was in '76.
Yeah, June 28th or 26th, something like that.
And they
June the 4th. Okay.
and they had a
No,
temp-
I think it was.
Well, if anybody knows,
for-
you would.
I phoned you.
Yeah, you phoned me, and I phoned the boss. He phoned me, and we were in Moose Jaw then.
Yeah.
And
I think Wayne's exact words were, "You got to be kidding."
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure.
And I phoned a regional engineer in Winnipeg and told him, and his wife thought somebody had died in the family. The way he was reacting.
Well, that would be a huge project to put a tower up like that.
Yeah.
So that was how long? It was just a few days, and then they
3
had
days,
a temporary.
We were back on Sunday.
They put a temporary tower up.
Yeah, they put up 2 or 3 temporary towers.
Over the period of time. The one they put up then, actually the top section of it was their gin pole, the pole they used to pull up other towers. So they left that on the top, which was the heaviest part of it was on the top. But they got it up to 300 foot. And then by using what they call a top hat, where there's the top guy wires are actually tied right to the antenna, to the metal part, and strung way out. And they took them on, and then we put a big insulator right there and then down to the ground. And that one didn't work too bad actually, compared to, it was not as good as the full height, but the what they call the top hat, that piece going out like that caused an image, and that gave them gave us better coverage. But as soon as they went and built one, they built the same height, only without the top hat.
Right.
They just used straight guy wires, and it wasn't right. Because I was out doing field strength measurements for 2 years, I think, practically proving that the signal was not out there.
Was that temporary tower built? That wasn't built in the exact same location, was it? Or
Well, the first temporary tower was built north of the existing tower, on the north side of the tuning house.
and then they built a new tower in '83 or something, was it?
Then
Well, they built another one on the site.
remember they didn't want to use they didn't think that the old tower base was good enough, so they built it 20 feet.
20 feet north of it, yeah.
And
Used
then
screw-in anchors.
then that didn't work, so then they decided they'd build another tower. Remember?
Yeah.
And that was really fun, because every time the one tower is energized and they're building a tower alongside it that isn't energized, and we're in the transmitter adjusting things and lowering
Trying to-
power, because every time they put and these sections were hot now.
Yeah.
The tower next to them, you see,
There was
and that
steel
was-
bolt. The insulator at the base was held in place, top and the bottom of it for support, by steel bolts. So the bottom of the bolts were grounded, top was connected right to the tower.
Yeah.
Those steel bolts started smoking.
Yeah.
Then they came to the conclusion
No.
that they just can't do it that
We
way.
we finally just had to shut down so they could
Yeah, so they could
finish
finish
the tower.
Yeah.
And then they built another one right next. The last of the temporary towers was built right next to the transmitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that little tuning house still there? Or is it gone now?
I think.
There was a
But-
little building. Look, there was actually a guard shed during the war.
Yeah.
What happened to the EMO unit?
Oh, he sold it. They
Yeah.
they took the they didn't even take the Jenny out of it. They kept the whole. They sold the thing.
Yeah. I wish we had. Have you got any good pictures of that EMO unit? You know, you can't find that EMO unit. Was kind of part of the history of
Yeah.
what happened in the Diefenbaker days. You know.
Yeah, well, it was part of it.
And
Cuban
and I
Missile
can't
Crisis,
find
and-
any good pictures of that old floor.
Well, I
in
can.
that-
Did we ever take pictures of it up?
Did we ever?
we didn't get the tower up, did we?
No,
We were getting it laid. We were getting it all laid out, ready to put it up, and we got an emergency phone call. Don't put those towers up. They fall down and they'll never.
Well, Carmen was putting theirs
Yeah.
up. They got it up, and Watrous, George, remember George figured, well,
Yeah.
if they got it up.
We should do
And then they found out that it was easy to put up, but taking it down was a whole other problem. And that's what happened at Carmen. They lost the tower putting it down. So
They didn't have insulators. They used poly rope. Well, poly rope stretches. How do you know about that? So they had a gin pole type of thing. You're supposed to put this gin pole up and have that sent to the center of the part of the tower, to the center top, and then lift it up and then guy it. But it was only about, what, 100-foot tower?
this EMO unit was a complete radio station and had a transmitter in it that you could put it on any frequency you wanted. And you carried it your own tower, and it had a little studio, you know, and it was a truck and a trailer, had its own generator.
Yeah.
It was it was really quite a nice little unit, but I don't know how many of them. How many would there be?
Oh, there was one for each region.
There was a bunch of these EMO
Roughly
units.
10 of them.
So we used to just run the thing every year just to make sure that we'd put a few miles on it.
We ran into a dummy load.
And then we would take the vehicle for a run and make sure that it was.
I still think that thing would make a handy camper just down here at the beach once in a while. Could be,
Yeah.
It had a double bunk in it for 2 people, and
Okay.
a nice table and chair, and a console. In fact, the console was portable, and smoky.
We even went so far as to put a box. It had a twin-cylinder Onan diesel power plant, and we went so far as to put a box over it with a light bulb in it to kind of keep it warm in the wintertime, in case we needed it. We wanted to run it.
Yeah.
The permanent tower that's up now, that was put up in about '83, and that was original height, I think, 400.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
465 or something.
Yeah, 450. The active portion of the tower is 455 feet at 5 foot. So 455 feet plus the height of the insulator, which may be a foot. So the height, not 60, or not 65, which was the insulator. The concrete base was 65. It would be about 460 counting the concrete base.
Yeah.
But why did it take, that would be, what, 6-7 years? Why would it take that long for them to put up a...
Stubborn.
Stubborn?
Well, the engineers all had their own ideas, you know, doing calculations and figuring, and of course they would be trying to do it, you know, with the price of towers
Yeah.
in those days. So it was a funny thing when they finally decided to put up the tower the same height as the original tower, but only maybe not anywhere near the same mass. I think the tower that's up there is now 36 inch.
I don't know.
It's 36 inch, I think.
that
The
big?
other one was 6'6" width, so 30 inch maybe. But
Yeah.
anyway, they put up the lighter tower, but once they got it to the 460 foot
Yeah.
level, soon as we went to match it right on the nose, we had no more trouble. We got a good match, and again we were back to where we could get 50,000 watts
Yeah.
at 30 amps.
The only
And,
trouble with that new tower, because it's not as wide, doesn't have the it doesn't have the width. You get frost build up on it. It's more noticeable.
Yeah, you get the rime problems.
And the old one, you really couldn't tell much difference when you had say a half an inch or an inch of frost even on it. But when you get it narrower, that frost tends to detune it a bit.
Yeah.
So you get a higher, what they call SWR.
Right.
How big is your chip?
Well, we've got 74 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know how long you folks want to keep talking or keep talking about this.
We'll have to go to another question.
What was like some of the routine maintenance that you guys did during your day there?
Oh, routine. The routine maintenance with the RCA would be you'd be constantly watching your water and your air,
The
and
cooling
your
facilities.
motors, And there was a pile of motors, blowers in that old RCA, There was a lot of them. It wasn't like the Continental where you got down to one blower, but there they had little motors on the peak and carrier tubes keeping this,
Even
that,
a couple of little domestic ones fastened because they work better and things like that.
and then all the air conditioning equipment. You had the train cooler, for the water, and you had the regular air conditioning and the water and the temperature of the water. You really had to watch that in the hot weather. That would be a lot of maintenance, and then of course, what would be the other important thing would be making sure that you kept a good record of tube life. We used to just put so many hours.
Did you talk about the
on a
still
tube.
at all?
Eh?
Did you talk about the still at all?
I told them,
okay,
we
good.
talked about the still, but we can't find it.
It's in Regina basement at the broadcast center.
Oh, because they'd like to have that in the museum.
Well, good luck. They should have it there.
Do you remember, Wayne, that at one time we had to have a license to run that
Not only
still?
one time, there was a license there all the time, up-to-date license. To operating a still.
Yeah.
Even though Stacy never did figure out a way of making it work with the mash.
Well, I guess you could have easily put something in the still,
It would be hard though with that cooling system used.
but
Nothing's impossible if you have.
it was a
to
very
try hard.
simple piece of equipment, really.
There's a 5 kilowatt element in a brass tank with a plexiglass top on it, and a feed line would bring the water up into it. And there's a valve on the top where you manually adjusted the temperature. Like there was cold water coming in, but that boiling water from the heating element would be going down a tube. There's a condensing section. You condense and dribble down the tube. And there's a valve there that you could adjust to make that water at a given point just right so that the maximum condensation was taking place and there was very little overflow, but there was still water that would be spilling out and flushing as it goes. So there's tubes within a tube.
So the distilled water, what was it used for? All the cooling or just some
Well,
of it?
just the big tube.
Just the tube, just a big tube.
You must remember that when you were cooling the 898s, you were pouring water right on the live plate of the tube. So you had coils. You had special coils to isolate your distilled water from the pumps and everything also. Then you had targets in your system to that would look after any stray.
Yeah, well, we would make up these targets ourselves, and the target connected to a little milliammeter that would show us if there's any.
But we had good distilled water, I'll tell you. It was
Home brewed.
good. No, it was good stuff. It was,
Yeah, all our kids were raised on it.
yeah. But we had a big supply always had a big supply on hand in case we blew a hose or something.
You know, the biggest shock I think I ever had was that going out there that morning to sign on, and the pump well was full of distilled water.
Yes.
What happened there?
Well, somebody at night, and it was not Orin, somebody at night was topping up the tank. You had to do that periodically, tank top just to a line, everything on the glass, and bringing it up, and he got distracted. Got to shut it off. So the big tank of backup water filled up this tank, flowed over this tank. The drain happened to be closed in the pump well, so when I come in there, the pumps are underwater that run this distilled water. I said, okay, now that's distilled water, or it was distilled water. It got till it got into that well with pot metal and goodness knows what else, and the drain wasn't open. So the first thing I did, of course, was shut the water off, and there's no point to that because there wasn't any left in the storage tank. But I went down and made sure the drain was open, and then when the water got down far enough to hopefully clear the pumps, I turned the pumps on and they were running. And the water flow was there, but then I ended up with a pail dipping into the top of the one tank and putting the spare water back in the other one in case we ever did need it.
Well, the running tank was, we used to run it about half.
Yeah, well, close to it, yeah.
And then the storage tank, we used to keep it, you know, almost full. It always was up the top of the glass. Because everybody, we all used distilled water. It was good for the kids.
Yeah.
Well, at that time you didn't use it.
And really, it wasn't a good idea with distilled water, it was a good idea to keep it moving and keep it moving, you know. Like water, you didn't want it sitting there all the time. So it was just another one of the many things that we did.
One of those little things that shows how a mistake can have its ramifications.
There was some interesting things happened. We actually went on 24 hours for a period of time.
Yeah.
I can remember tuning in Sputnik and recording it every time it went over. Remember that? And there was another thing happened that there was this Ripple Rock. I don't know if you ever remember them talking about Ripple Rock, but between Vancouver Island and the main line was a bad rock that used to bother their navigation.
Oh, okay.
And they decided that they were going to blow it up, which they did. And it was a big deal.
One of the biggest marine.
And we actually stayed on the air all night with Apollo 13. I think,
oh, yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And when Kennedy.
And remember hours of our own. We were the broadcasters.
Yeah.
Between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock.
We had a
1 hour tape. We ran out of water.
We had to make up the time difference, so we had to put this tape on.
Yep. So you were on during Apollo 13, did you say?
It seems to me, if there was something important happened, we were in a position where if they wanted us to be on the air all night, Apollo 13 was one of the things. And I don't know, when President Kennedy was assassinated, it seems to me there might have been another
it's one of those
time.
Situations, and all of a sudden Toronto says, oh, we got to broadcast this across the country. Well, that's fine, but when they decided at 1 o'clock in the morning here, there ain't anybody around to do it. So somebody's got to go out there and turn the thing on. We don't know in advance.
Yeah. So basically just 2 or 3 times, or do they do it quite a bit over the night, or
Well, anything, right, well,
Yeah.
like Cuban
Bigger.
crisis, things like that, of course,
the Cuban Missile Crisis?
got a big issue.
Yeah.
And that's what got us the fallout shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all due to the politics
The Cold War.
and the
Yeah.
Cold War,
Yeah.
what was happening at the time.
So what was I know we've talked about it before, but what was the story with the fallout shelter? When, like, that would have been built in the Diefenbaker
Well,
years?
they had the Diefen bunker, and then we had the receiving end here.
Okay.
The CBC, they've done some restoring in the Diefen bunker in outside of Ottawa.
Yeah.
To the broadcasting section of it. But our fallout shelter here actually was the prairie, or for Saskatchewan and CBK and its coverage area, was the location for the receiving end of it. And that was, at that time, we had to have somebody on site all the time to run the old transmitter. But so that, when we built that shelter, the only thing that exploded there were cans of beans after we had our food storage too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Warren said one time that they would have, all the radio stations across Canada would have taken the feed from your location there.
CBC was the national broadcaster for EMO.
Yeah.
For CBK.
For CBK was.
Yeah.
They were all required to
Take
feed.
our feed, or the closest CBC feed they could get.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
We even had special recordings and stuff.
It's
in case.
scary.
Yeah.
The recordings that if they actually got on the air by mistake would cause panic.
Yeah.
And they were locked away in a drawer. Let's see what else.
So the CBC